This is the In Good Time podcast with Nick Lowe and Andrew Steininger. In this episode, we go through our own personal background, from when we began to think about music all the way till present day. We cover key points and events in our musical career and talk about some of the challenges and positive things that happened to us along the way. Well, let's start where all good things do, at the beginning.
At the beginning. So the first thing that you had thought of was kind of a summary of what got us to where we are today.
Yeah. So just a brief overview of where both of us were that got us, from our infancy to where we are musically right now.
Well, if I'm remembering, we have pretty different stories about how we ended up as music teachers, if I'm remembering correctly. So for me,
we're going to find out.
Right. Right. For me, I had wanted to be a band teacher pretty much since I started playing trumpet in 5th grade. I remember, just thinking, well, this is like the coolest thing ever. I wanted to do music. And because, you're 10, you don't really know what music careers there are. It's like, well, my band teacher, he does music all the time. So that's what I want to do. And so I kind of went through it that way. And I remember as I got older, the grade level that I wanted to teach grew with me. When I was in 5th grade, I wanted to teach 5th
Interesting.
grade. When I was in middle school, I was like, I think middle school is the spot for me. You get to high school and you're like, no, I want to do high school.
Yeah.
And so now I'm teaching 5th grade band and orchestra, which is quite the surprise. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later about how I ended up.
Yes, but so you had the idea of teaching music right from pretty much the very beginning.
Yeah, and so it was something that I wanted to do. And so I was kind of like a target in the distance and just kept on going toward that target.
Yeah.
Pretty much all through my schooling. So
yeah, I didn't even think about the teaching part of it until basically right before I applied for colleges. But I was pretty much always involved in some kind of music. Like I can remember times back way before I was even like in school, maybe not before I was in school, but when I was really young, where it's just whenever I heard something that I liked, that became the only thing I was interested in at the moment, one of those space cadet kind of kids.
Yeah.
Like I would just my eyes would kind of like roll back in my head and I would just be like experiencing the world through my ears. And that's what I remember from a kid. But like it never occurred to me that I could translate that into a job. So like, for example, it was always just more of a cool thing to do. Like in 8th grade, we had a talent show and I went to a small Catholic school. So music there was pretty minimal. It was like pull out lessons once a week and then early band like a couple weeks before our concert. So that was kind of minimal music for me to start. But anyway, there was this talent show where we did this big group thing, big class group thing, and we did this like zoo theme, but it was in the jungle. And I, being the ridiculous child that I was and am, everybody else was like the lions or like groups of people, the lions and the bears and the all the other regular animals, and I was a saxophone playing cow. I played The Lion Sleeps Tonight on the saxophone, and I was like moving in between all the kids. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say that it's quite different. Our ideas of music were quite different, like where you wanted to go with it. But I think we both were pretty musically involved all the way through high school, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Interestingly for me, you were saying that when you were a kid, it was like almost part of your nature was the music, and for me, I remember it was like a light bulb went on when I was in 5th grade. Because prior to that, I liked going to my music class, but I was like just the same as any other class. And then when I got to fifth grade, it was like band kind of opened my eyes to what music really could be. And I remember that's when I started really like listening and thinking about, oh, I like this kind of music. I don't like this kind of music and whatnot. Um, when I was in middle school, of course, I did like the concert band. I went to, for those of you listening, I grew up in just the kind of northern Illinois suburbs, as well as Andrew, but I went to public school and he went to private school. So as you're listening,
Mhm.
you're going to get a little bit of the differences between those. So when I was in middle school, I did the concert band, and then we also did. There was like an extracurricular, like they called it wind ensemble, which was a before school thing, and I did that seventh and eighth grade. Then I got involved in jazz only in my eighth grade year, and that's something that I always kind of did for fun, but
Hmm.
didn't really click with me what jazz was until much later on. Maybe even college.
Yeah, that's the my high school musical experience definitely was the thing that set me on the path to like actually thinking that I could do like a profession with it, because I think in high school I did just about everything a saxophonist could do, and even stuff the saxophonist didn't do, because I actually changed instruments several times, not from like
Oh, did you?
not from like saxophone, but like for example, I played alto sax my freshman year in concert band, and then when I the next year when we re-auditioned, my band director said, hey, we don't really can't really put any more altos in the next band because we have a million of them. Would you be interested in playing a low clarinet? And when he said low clarinet, it was like contra clarinet.
Oh,
So for a year or two I played contra clarinet in my concert band. And that was just kind of a reoccurring theme for me, where if someone had an opportunity for me to play something, I kind of just did it. So I ended up I originally auditioned on alto for the jazz band at my high school. And again, same thing, too many altos already. So he said, would you want to play the Barry? And Nick knows better than most that the Barry basically became my kind of tour de force all the way through college. Um, so I mean, I don't know what the trumpet world is like in terms of that, but I know that I kind of just soaked in as many of those opportunities as I could in high school, and all of those had different impacts on the way that I was like, directionally going, because I played bass clarinet in the orchestra for a little while. I played in the jazz band and the concert band. I even did musicals and sang a little bit.
yeah, yeah. So I'm a trumpet, and it's a little different for me. There was only one group that I was in that I did not play trumpet in, and that was I was in a steel pan band at my high school. That was a blast. I played the double tenors or the double seconds, I think, was what it was called. But for me, it was a very very trumpet focused. But I kind of did the same thing in high school. Um, Jazz band, I did marching band, of course, jazz band. I did the pit orchestra for a couple musicals, but still on trumpet. And we actually got to do. There was an audition group that was after school that was like a symphony orchestra kind of thing where we'd go in and with the orchestra kids as well and play. But for me, it was all trumpet focused, and
Mhm.
I think that probably for you having switched around, it probably made some of those woodwind tech classes in college much easier.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't have to do clarinet. I mean, and I had never actually played the alto clarinet before, the B flat clarinet before. But I had enough of the know-how, and I think at that time I played it a little bit in jazz band too, to
Mhm.
to be able to convince our professor Gail Crossan that I was competent enough.
Uh, there you go. I'm trying to remember. I skipped one as well. Oh, you know what? I skipped clarinet as well, but it was
Hmm.
because I had taken lessons with her.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I did
Right.
like a whole semester of extra clarinet lessons. Uh, because clarinet's probably my second favorite instrument to play, right after
Rock
guitar.
on. So why don't we talk about kind of that, like, senior year of high school? You were about to go into college, and let's just talk about where we were at, as young musicians, and about to be, kind of adults going to college, where we were kind of mentally at with like our path, right?
What was it for you? Where was your headspace?
So as you probably like have observed from me in college, I'm usually pretty just all invested in what I'm doing at the moment. So college still seemed what like a distant thing for me, even all the way up to the end of senior year. Um, but what really kind of set the path for me, what kind of cleared away some of the debris and distraction in my head, was I was a drum major my senior year. And it wasn't just being a drum major that kind of made me want to be a teacher, although it was definitely kind of a formative experience that set the tone for what I eventually wanted to do. But it was so strange. I was selling tickets for a show that I was doing, a drama, in the lunchroom, and I was also in choir at the time, because my senior year, kind of like my senior year at Elmhurst, I just did basically everything music. I didn't have really anything else going on other than music stuff. So I was in choir and all that stuff. But we were selling tickets, and the choir accompanist walks up to our booth. And this is an older gentleman who only came in like 2 times a week. And I maybe said hi to him like 2 or 3 times. And he walks up to the booth and he looks at me, and like the first or second thing he says is, "You'd be a good band director." And why that stuck with me, I have no idea. But it was like, for the first time, somebody who I thought really didn't know me all that well just had this opinion. And then I guess that was enough perspective for me to be able to look at myself and be like, oh, wait a second. Okay, you've been doing all this music stuff. You like it. You like to be kind of a leader because of the drum major thing. So at that point, and honestly, it was kind of, if it wasn't that moment, it was really right around that moment where I'm like, okay, let's get a little more serious about applying for specifically music stuff and looking for specifically music schools and all that.
Mhm.
And that was pretty close to the college application deadline too. I guess I'm lucky that happened.
Yeah. Otherwise, you might have been doing something totally
Mm,
else. For me, since I had known that this is something that I wanted to do, I didn't have all of the necessarily maybe anxiety that I know a lot of people experience with, what do I do? What do I pursue? So when I was looking around, it was more of the anxiety of getting things done. Because when I was in
mm,
high school, even my senior year in high school, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go to college to be a band director, but it was just you know, applying to colleges is like that's very stressful, and I
mm,
remember having a real hard time with that. But eventually I obviously I did. I went and auditioned, and I had a really good experience in one of my auditions, and a really poor experience in the other one. And
mm-hmm.
it was like, well, okay, well, yeah, obviously the experience that was great, I'm gonna go for it. And so that's where I landed at Elmhurst.
I remember the audition process because I actually ended up auditioning at like 6 or 7 different schools in
Mm.
person. Um, but I remember the audition process being really foreign to me. It was like a really good learning experience, but it was nothing like I'd ever done before. Just the music education and experience that I had throughout high school and before that, I'd never really experienced that level of an auditioning, environment. So I remember, I think it was the first audition that I did. The guy like actually fixed my embouchure, the way I was playing my saxophone, and I actually made a change going forward for other things.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, what have I been missing, sort of thing. It was
Yeah.
like a wake up call.
Oh, yes. It the wake up call is definitely a good way to put it, because you think you get in there to your first college audition And even if you're a little nervous, you're probably thinking on some level, all right, I've got this. I was, most people are like, yeah, I was one of the better ones at my high school, and going in, and then you get into the audition, and you're like, you play like garbage. Your first
Mhm.
audition, you play like garbage, and then you sit there and you think, um, that did not go well. I have to fix something. And I know for me, after my first audition, it was hunker down in practice time. you
Yeah.
know, I don't know if it was the same thing for you with the Amish switch, but
Yeah, I definitely remember um like that experience of doing something and knowing that you could have done it a little better, which is a common theme that happens throughout your college and even after that.
oh
Now I do it all
yeah,
the time with my teaching. um but it's like, the better you get at something, the more you notice about things you don't like about what you just did. Like the
yeah,
more granular you get with things that you could do better and things that weren't quite right. And, it's like when you don't know anything, it's like, yeah, that sounded pretty good. And then the more you learn, the more you see. Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of like teaching my fifth graders right now. Some of them are, we're just happy that you covered the right hole this time on your clarinet. Like, great
Oh
job.
yeah. I know that feeling.
You
Uh,
know, and
There's
then oh,
There's
go
a
ahead.
little there's a little girl that I'm teaching right now. She has the smallest fingers in the world.
Oh
And I'm
no,
like, "All right, you have to be like the best finger placement person ever because you have
yes,
no wiggle room."
yeah.
So now we're in freshman year in college and you and I meet each other in when did we first meet each other?
It was back.
Was it a class? Because I met Randy, who is our roommate for a long while. I think 2 years we were
Yeah,
roommates.
three
Well,
for me.
you and Randy have been roommates for a while,
Yeah.
a year before. But
Hmm.
anyway, I met Randy in my FYS class, a freshman year seminar. I think
Something
that's
like
what
that.
it was.
That's probably.
Um, or did we meet through our fraternity, Phi Mu Alpha?
I think we met before that. I remember I have the text saved for
Oh,
some reason. Not that we met each other, but it was a text for some reason that I took a screenshot of, and it was something like it was us just getting together with a bunch of the freshmen for like a jam session on a late
hmm.
night or something like that. And I remember we did a couple of
Oh,
those.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, I think that's where we ended up
Huh.
meeting. But I don't think I really got to know you until we did Rush later on that semester.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's just take a brief stock of kind of where we're at in freshman year. Like what we get to school, we've had like a month or two in school.
Mhm.
If you can remember, like where are you at with like, okay, I am now this student and now I'm playing trumpet in college, kind of where are you at with that?
I remember my freshman year, I jumped right in immediately, and I was trying to do as much as possible. But I remember like definitely trying to do everything was it was overwhelming for sure,
Hmm.
but I think it was a good way to just get yourself out there, meet new people, because you get to the point where you feel comfortable just saying hi to different people you don't know
Yeah.
if you make a point to try to do that.
Yeah, I always remember you being very friendly and confident right from the very beginning. And as someone who was a commuter to start, and I take the train every single day, half an hour,
I
and get
forgot
get
about that.
there before everybody else, and I'd be sitting in the lobby, the Irian Hall lobby, waiting for music theory to start. It's always nice to have people that just not even necessarily looking to have a conversation, but just looking to say hi. I acknowledge your presence. Um, so someone who's been there in that, the person who's on the outside kind of looking in almost. Um, yeah, that definitely was. I remember that environment, that freshman music theory environment in the lobby being a very positive experience where we all just kind of got together right before class and Nobody knew what was going on ever. Um, I mean, not necessarily with the class, because I always felt pretty good about the class, but
Mhm.
um, like just general life. Everyone was like, "Whoa, we're in college now."
Yeah, but before that we would go over to the lobby. My FYS group, so the freshmen, what did we decide it was, freshman seminar or something? We
Yeah.
would always have breakfast together in um, over down in the cafeteria, and then we'd go up there, and so it was like a double hit of getting. It's interesting because one thing that I noticed very quickly was my friend group. As soon as that orientation was done, I was like, oh, these are the guys I'm gonna talk to for all 4 years. And then you talk to them for like maybe 3 extra days, and then you're like, wait a second, you're a business major and I don't have any classes in you, and then you switch over kind of to those.
I remembered that about freshman year and sophomore. As we got older, it was like the older you got, the less non-major friends you had.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the same for everybody in the music department, but it certainly was that way for me. I don't think I socialized with anybody that was not a music person um after about sophomore year, junior year, because it was,
Hmm.
basically just full ahead at that point.
Right. Like even the people that were in my like education classes that were not musicians,
Hmm.
you know, I felt like I didn't even really talk to them too much, just because it was in like different worlds. Like they're over in Curitan, we're over in Erie, and we get together every once in a while. But speaking of education classes, what was the one that we had to do in the spring freshman year? It was Intro to Music Ed, right?
Was it 150?
That
No,
sounds about right.
maybe. So actually this is a good topic. So I have down about something that I wanted to talk about our beginnings of our college career was the ideas that or the what we came to think about our music ed department versus the education department. The way that we started
Oh,
to understand what those things were and how we related to those things,
yeah.
because that's important for a young music educator, because that relates directly to what you do in your first job, right?
Mhm.
Your music department and your administration or whatever department is outside of your area of influence.
Yeah, I had actually I had jotted down some couple notes, and under each one, I wrote down my musical growth that year versus my educational growth. So
Hmm.
maybe a little bit different about what you're talking about, but I was definitely thinking that same way too.
Yeah.
Uh, I had written down that for my education uh, or educational side freshman year, I was actually surprised because when I went back, I didn't see any like SEC classes or any of that freshman year. Most of that started sophomore year, which I thought was really interesting.
Right, because I think it was freshman year, the spring semester, we were all getting ready to apply for the ed department, right?
That's right. I forgot about that. Yes.
It
Yeah.
that that first that because when you get into college, you can't just be accepted into everything. You have to be accepted in the college, and then you have to get into all the different departments.
Right.
Um, so that I think that first hurdle for all of us, the first introduction into a lot of the pains that some of us felt with certain aspects of the education department, um, was starting off with that application process, right? Getting our things in order, making
Mhm.
sure that we have test scores that we need, or writing certain amounts of essays, or I think we had to put a philosophy in there, right?
Yeah,
For that
that
first
sounds
one.
about right. Yeah, so like a one-page
Hmm.
like philosophy of education, um, which freshman year philosophy was
Like
very different.
what do we know as freshmen just out of high school about anything? Like most of us don't even know what the word philosophy meant. You know what I mean?
Right, right, or at least in the context of education, like
Right.
like I have to come up with what my ideas are on education. But yeah, it definitely did set up that department split right away, um,
Hmm.
which I'm sure as we continue on the rest of the years in our discussion, we'll see more and more. Would you
Yeah.
like to take
So
that?
for a young student in college just out of high school, it's like, okay, we have all of the music department stuff coming at us, and then our introduction to the education department is this, basically this essay, right? This,
Mhm.
what felt like, just here's an essay you have to do, just like in high school, here's an assignment, turn this in.
Mhm.
So that's at least for me, that's what it felt like at that time.
Yeah, I remember everybody at that point was talking about it. Like if you were a music ed student, everybody was freaking out about this application. You know,
Hmm.
uh, there's like because you're all in the same boat, realistically.
Right.
No one has an idea of what it really looks like to get on the other side of that. You know,
Hmm.
the upperclassmen do, but when you're just talking to other freshmen, it's all hands in the air. Oh, you got this in. Oh, I still need to do that. Wait, what is a background check? How do I do that? Do I
Right.
have to go to the police?
Right.
Right. No one's had tuberculosis in like 50 years. Why do I have to get that checked?
Right. Oh my gosh, there's a bubble on my arm.
Right. Any other thoughts on freshman year? Or do you want to?
No, I mean, I think just as a kind of a silver lining or just an overall thought, I think for me it was just basically two things, adjusting to a new kind of lifestyle, right? Because college is completely different from high school. Um, most parts of it are, um, and then really for me it was now, like when you're in school for music, it's kind of a change in pace from high school, because now you're thinking about music full time, basically. You have some
Mhm.
classes that are not music related, um, but in high school it's kind of like, oh, you have other things that you're thinking about all the time. Like, you've got music is just one part of your day, versus in college when you're a music major, whatever kind of music major, there's a good chance that music takes up a majority of your time. So making that transition, digging into the idea that now it's time to think about music. And I think that freshman year was kind of me making that transition.
Yeah, it's definitely a transitional year. I looking back on the 4 years. So I did just 4 years and done. I think that my freshman year is probably the most nostalgic, just because it was so different. Once you get into the upper levels, you have established your role kind of within your even just like the people in your class, like they know who you are, you know what you're about, and you know what you want to do. But freshman year, there's such a great opportunity that you have to almost reinvent yourself. Like
Mm,
if you liked the portrayal of yourself that you had growing up, keep that going forward. But if there's an aspect of yourself that you are like, okay, I know I need to work on this. Freshman year of college is like the perfect opportunity, because not only does no one know you, but no one, like, to get philosophical, no one knows themselves, but like everybody's
right.
in that, everybody's this kind of like going through changes and thinking through their changes, for maybe the first time,
Right.
and how they want to be portrayed, both socially, professionally, musically
Yeah.
as well.
And none of the things are like predetermined for you anymore. Like in high school, there were a lot of things that were set up for you that you kind of filled in. But in college, you made a lot of the choices that led to certain decisions or certain consequences that you're absolutely right. We get to reinvent yourself a little bit. Um, and I don't know, I don't think that's a scary thing, because what's cool about freshman year is there's really room in there for you to kind of just spread out and do what you feel like doing at that time. But as we transitioned into like sophomore year and junior year, that's, and for me, like the end of sophomore year into junior year, that's when I felt like I needed to start to focus in and
Mhm.
really like kind of pay attention to where I'm going, what steps I'm taking. So like sophomore year, as we leave our freshman year, we have our first taste of what it's like to be kind of an adult person, keeping track of our own lives, sort of. Um, I remember, I think sophomore year was really the year when I started to pay attention to my schedule, like what class sequence I was going to be in. And this is like totally relevant for when we're out of school, is like just knowing where you're going and what your next step is, even if it's only one step ahead. Um, so I remember, because I at this point I was thinking, okay, I think I'm going to be a double major, a music ed and saxophone performance. So I really had to pay attention to what my schedule was. Um, but I don't think I ever felt like I had full like reins of what my schedule actually was until maybe senior year. It was just a constant kind of like reshuffling, looking at it, redoing things. And
Mhm.
that kind of, it felt that kind of way with my music studies as well, where I was just learning new things and constantly having to check this new thing out and fill in holes that I had in my playing and
Mhm.
practicing. And it was, and the best part about that, all that, was there were people that were doing it better than me that I was looking at the whole time.
Right, especially with those upperclassmen, where it's like
Right.
you can see what hard work looks like when it pays off. And even if you are unsure how to get there, you know that, okay, if I follow the same steps that these people did, then
Right.
I'm pretty much, I'll be in that same spot. Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that out of all 4 years, sophomore year was definitely the biggest difficulty spike, um, because I started off that year with an embouchure change, completely reworked the way that I was holding, or not holding it, but where I placed it on my face. Um, and so when I started off the year, my range was about half of what it was the previous year. Uh,
And
so
that's
it's
intimidating for someone who's like trying to be competitive. And no doubt that any music situation you're going to be in, whether or not the an instructor wants it to be not competitive, there almost always has to be an element of competitiveness that just naturally happens between people. When
Mhm.
you are trying to become better at something, you're going to make a comparison between you and someone else, and that sometimes is a good thing. But I'm sure for you that was a kind of an intimidating
Well,
like prospect when you like lose half of your ability to play something.
right. Well, I mean, it started off from day one with auditions, because I went in to do my audition and I had been working my tail off all summer long, with this embouchure change and really on the audition music. And I remember getting a call from our director, or an email or something, and he says, "Hey, I'd like to speak to you." And walking into his office and basically going, "Okay, what on earth happened during that audition? Because your scores are very low." And having to explain, I just completely redid the way that I played my instrument. Like, please be patient. And then, the director's going, "Oh, that makes sense. How can we work with you? Where should we put you in order to, like, for your success?" And once you got over the hurdle of the intimidation of, I can't really play right now, it's going to take a long time, and then you realize that the professors, they still care, and they're
Hmm.
thinking, where can we put you to be the most successful? It was like a huge wave of relief, like, okay, good, I've got people who are backing me here.
Yeah, that's a great attitude that I'm glad you picked up on, because that's something that as I have become an actual professional in the field, presently, that's an attitude that I try to exhibit at all times with all of my students. It's and even with myself as a new teacher, where are you at? What skills do you have? And what things do you know you're going to be bad at, right?
Mhm.
Like, just because I'm sure that you've found this in college and even after, it's much more crushing when you do something poorly that you didn't expect to do poorly, right? But
Yes.
if you go into something knowing where you're at and expecting okay, I'm going to do this, but I know I'm not going to be able to play, you know, perfect, or I'm not going to be able to do this perfectly, but knowing that you have room to grow, that gives you much more put you in a much better mindset to move forward past the things that you did wrong, versus the other way, you get stuck there. You're like, oh man, I stink, you know?
Yeah, I think you have to have an attitude of humility for sure,
Mm,
and understanding that you're not doing everything correctly. Sometimes, even if you think you are, and approaching it with a what can I learn? And if I feel like I'm doing a good job of it, how can I continue that into either my next lesson that I teach or my next performance? But always being willing to get feedback, you know, um, is I think it's huge.
I think sophomore year, maybe towards the end of it, was when I really started to understand the difference between what it meant to be a performer and an educator, and where those overlap, but where those also divide. Because at the end of sophomore year, if you remember, that's kind of when we started to see the fall off of people switching from music ed to other degrees, where they decided that music ed path was not for them. I
Yeah,
remember we joked, I think all the way through college, about putting together an in memoriam for all of our converted
that's right.
converted music majors.
That's right. Yep. All the way through. And I remember that being, that was, I'm trying to, I don't know what the right word for it is, almost heartbreaking,
Mhm.
where it's like you're obviously the person, if they quit music ed as a degree, it's not like they're going anywhere. I mean, even if they transfer school, they're still there. But for the few people who continue, you look around at some point and you go, okay, we started with 30 and now we're down to like 10.
Right.
What on earth am I doing to myself? So on one level, it's that same it's the same word I keep thinking of during all of sophomore year, is just intimidating. Like
Mhm.
look at all these people not making the same decisions that I am, and they're
Right.
smiling a lot more than me right now.
Right. No, and the cool thing, well, cool and scary thing was, I think at the end of sophomore year, that's when I really saw the progress in the two different directions, right? Like obviously we were all still making progress as musicians, but at the end of sophomore year, you're starting to do things that aren't specifically musically related, be it like education stuff, where you start to see, okay, I'm starting to understand what it's like to actually be a teacher, and the techniques that are involved with being a teacher, and getting up in front of people, and preparing lesson plans, and it's like identifying those two divergent areas of progress.
Yeah, definitely. Because in your on the music side of things, you have the conducting classes that you usually
Hmm.
do sophomore year, and you're getting in front of kids for probably the first time, maybe once or twice freshman year. But I
The
mean, really,
the first time that feels like actually relevant, right, to what you're
right.
about to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Especially getting in front of an ensemble, and it dawning on you, I've done my prep and I've been prepared for all of these assignments, and I still have no idea what's going on. I
Yeah.
remember the first middle school band that I got in front of conducting to. Um, we got the choice of what piece we'd like to work with them, and I wanted the Olympic fanfare because that's such a cool piece. I love John Williams, and I get in front of this band and I go, "Okay, here we go, trumpets," and they don't play, and
Mhm.
I'm thinking to myself, "Hmm, I thought that when I do this and I point at you, that's when you're supposed to play." And then you kind of have to backtrack, and you think it's like all of these. Okay, I've done the work. Now I'm in front of people, and they're smaller, and they need guidance now, and that's like the music side of things. And then on the education side of things, it's like you're starting to get more of techniques, and like especially
Mhm.
like the vocabulary on you know like what is this type of learner or this type of situation, and
Mhm.
what you do in those kind of things.
Yeah, definitely. So we exit sophomore year, and now we're getting into junior slash senior year, and this is really where the rubber hits the road, or whatever the phrase is. Junior year definitely, I think for everybody, especially the music ed majors, I can't really comment on what some of our performance majors slash jazz studies slash music business people were feeling, but I know for all of us, we are like, oh my gosh, next semester. And I know this wasn't the case for me specifically, but next in the near future, we are about to be teachers. It's like once you get past junior year, it's downhill into you're going to be a full-fledged teacher. So I think let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, it's definitely a very content heavy year. As I went back and I looked at what classes I was taking, it blew my mind how much I was like being required to do in just one semester. Because you do music history, you're doing like learners with exceptionalities, you're doing like a lot of your tech classes, and it's just a massive amount of information that you've got to be able to just absorb like a sponge,
Hmm.
and like all of this information. And at the same time, it's like, okay, not only am I dealing with all of this content, but I have to think about the way that I can tell it to someone else. Like,
Hmm.
how do you make it relevant to yourself versus how do I teach this concept to a child?
Yeah, I think it was senior year where I figured this out, or people started to talk about this more. But junior year is really where you started to feel this pressure of, okay, you're still a student, but you're also now going to be a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the conflict between those two things, both as a musician and as an educator. So junior year, people are starting to think about what their senior recital might be, or what their last couple of juries are going to be. For me, who is a double major, a 5-year double major, I was thinking about my personal recitals that I needed to do to complete my degree. But at the same time, you're still learning how to do stuff, like the pieces that I was preparing for those recitals, and like the assignments I was doing for those education courses that were getting us ready to go become teachers. We literally are learning some of that content as you go, like, obviously, but it's still an intimidating and pressure packed situation where you're like, oh, I'm a student. Like, I don't know this stuff, but I'm learning it. And then right around the corner, you are going to be the person who has to know and do that stuff.
Right. And you start thinking about getting those 100 hours going.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
there's because I feel like most people freshman year it's not even on the radar. Sophomore year you're like, yeah, I did the 6 hours that I needed for this class, or I got one. I did it. I got 1 hour from my old high school, and which suddenly turns out that doesn't count. And then junior year it's like, um, okay, in a few months, I'm going to need to present 100 hours of service that I've done at different schools. I got to start sending some emails, and
Right.
getting in contact with different teachers and whatnot.
Yeah, and not only that, but the I think it finally dawned for a lot of people. I've always been a little bit more organized slash like just kind of put together with keeping things and generally having a place for things. But I think it dawned on a lot of people junior year that you can't get away with just like hoping all the papers and dust settles in the right place.
Right.
It's like you have to have a plan for what's going to happen, and you got to put all the stuff where it's going to be. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of work to do later on to make up for the fact that you weren't prepared to start with. The 100-hour sheets is the perfect example of that.
Mhm. The nice thing though is if you are not prepared, there's plenty of time to get prepared.
Hmm.
There's definitely a lot of time for you to turn it around, and a lot of chances that the professors usually give you. I mean, they were always very understanding. Hey, you didn't get that hour to me this week. That get it done as soon as possible. Speaking of all that paperwork, I think right around junior year is the point where you got to start thinking about taking the content test. And
Hmm.
I don't know about your content test situation, but mine was, it's
Didn't
funny.
you? It was you and Cassie Deck, who you guys didn't you get rescheduled or something, or you drove like a far distance to go do this thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, we had been studying together all week. I mean, we were like got out all the notes, all the different stuff, and we drove like 40 minutes to take this test.
Oh, okay.
And we walk in and we walk out and we were like, are you kidding me?
I have that. I had the same reaction.
Like, what on earth was that? And I don't know if they've changed it. I don't know if they've changed it since then, but it's like, okay, did one of the questions really just ask me about, is Happy Birthday a ceremonial song?
Well, there were questions on there that were like obviously it's good to be aware of some of the context of music and some things like that, but just oddly specific questions about things that you wouldn't really even know unless you studied them in college. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I'm not I guess that's what the purpose of the content test would be, to prove that you studied things in college, but there were other I would have I would have put many different things on that test to study whether or not a candidate was aware of the content of music to teach in an actual school, you know?
Right. I think for anybody who is looking ahead to the content test, don't blow it off either. Like, even if Andrew and I are saying that, the questions that we happened to get were easier. I mean, there were definitely questions on there that I did not know how to answer.
Yeah, that's true.
I think for me, the areas on the test that or that came up the most were definitely learners with exceptionalities or special needs, um, vocal things, be that vocal tech or general music related, and then the theory portion too. And if you're okay with theory, like even just to a moderate level, you'll be totally fine. But if theory is one of your weaker areas, the full, there's like a third of the test or something that's on that. So definitely be ready to do that.
Mm-hmm. So let's transition now into senior year. We're full-fledged leaders, right, in the music department. Whether you wanted to be or not, there are freshmen that see you as someone who's experienced. So let's dive into that a little bit, both on the musical side and the educational side. For music educators and like.
Well, on the education side, I felt like those classes became the forefront for me, especially since I did it in 4 years, and so I didn't have an extra buffer maybe to switch around classes. I don't know if it was just, I don't know where you place things.
This is where our tracks diverge a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Right. So coming off of junior year, I really felt like junior year was probably the height of my music performance abilities so far, because there's it was a balance between the education side and the music side. And as soon as you got to senior year, I feel like, for me at least, the educational courses and the amount of work that had to get done totally eclipsed music. And so I think that my playing actually probably took a hit that I didn't get back until I graduated and started really working on those skills again. Especially with SEC 421. Is that reading in the
literacy, academic literacies. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So what was it for you that fifth year right before you?
So the fifth year, there definitely was a decrease in my musicianship side of things, right? Because like you said, you want to get focused on the task that's right in front of you, essentially. So for all of you people that are 4-year graduates, you basically have completed all of the musical components to your degree by that point, if you're only one major music ed. So you really have to kind of prioritize and execute on the things that you are that need to get done. There it's I If you're not prioritized in that way, right, it's easy to kind of just let things slide, and those classes senior year will not allow for too much wiggle room. in terms of you slacking or letting your schedules and your habits go a little bit.
Right. If you're not at that point ready to be in front of students on a regular basis, it's going to challenge you.
Mm,
I know for me, in those classes, I only had Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes my that fall of senior year, and yet my Tuesdays and Thursdays weren't light either. Tuesday I was at a middle school teaching or like observing, co-teaching, whatnot, general music all day long, and so and general music not being an area that I'm super comfortable with, but being required for 421. Um, and if you're not ready to wake up every morning at the right time to have an actual meal instead of just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna have some Pop Tarts today," no, like you need to sit down, get your protein in the morning, get the carbs in, something that'll make you last. Figure out.
because we don't always have the opportunity to eat lunch as music educators, right?
Well, I'm fortunate in my situation. I minimum I get my 40 minutes.
I think that senior year, that final year, um, going back to this idea of student versus professional, it's like this is where you kind of go through the meat grinder a little bit, and you force yourself to go and do things and get stuff done that you don't really want to do most of the time. But what happens at the end is you become a more confident person. You don't know everything by any stretch of the imagination, but I had 5 years to kind of get a little bit more of this. So by the time I left, I had even more of an experience with doing more things and experiencing more struggles and challenges. But I really do think that the fourth year of music ed, by the time you're done, you feel like you are able to tackle most things that are thrown at you, which is super important when you transition to going into your first job. Because your first year teaching, and we'll talk about this in a second, is like freshman year all over again, in a
Right.
lot of ways.
It really is.
um
Yeah.
so I know for me, it was both in my education courses and in all my ensembles and lessons where really started to make that transition between, okay, I'm just a student, to now I'm a leader of myself. I'm approaching a professional now, and I
Mhm.
have to have that attitude.
Right. And of course, the ultimate meat grinder, I guess, in your words, is student teaching. Um,
Hmm.
because first of all, you get to student teaching and you're thinking, finally, this is exactly what I've wanted to do since I got to college. And let me tell you, it does feel great. I mean, student teaching is a fantastic experience. I got to student teach before 2020, and so I had a more traditional experience. I don't know about
I had
about
half of it.
right.
I had half of a traditional experience.
Did you at the middle school level, right?
Yeah, so I had elementary and middle school for, I think I had like 3/4 of my first student teaching placement was like
Wow.
good to go. And then we hit March, and then COVID happened.
Right. So that's a bummer to hear. Like I so much of the way I teach, I feel like, or the professional side, I feel like I got directly from student teaching, in like the here's how you really operate as a teacher, and you learn what the school or what college didn't tell you and what college did tell you and you didn't listen, different things.
Yeah.
But the best part about it is you get to make those connections with the students, and you start really kind of figuring out, oh, this is how I work as a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, I think definitely student teaching is where you it's where it's your playground essentially. And playgrounds, people think of playgrounds as a fun place, but you forget that when you're a kid, like, you fall off of the playground, a lot. and like you run over and trip on things. And that's what happens in student teaching. It's fun because you're smart, like, things about things, and you get to actually teach, which is what you wanted to do. But there are plenty of times where you don't do the right thing, or you don't do the thing that you thought you were going to do. So you get those bumps and scrapes and bruises. But you're learning how to navigate that playground, right? You're learning how far or how high to go on the swing, so you don't, just wipe out when you try and jump off afterward.
Right. And I mean, going along with the analogy of a playground, definitely try it when you're student teaching, get out of your comfort zone. Day one, just jump all in, get out of that comfort zone, because you're gonna walk in there and you're gonna feel like, yes, I've arrived. And then like you get in front of your first class and you're like, aha, okay, now I actually have to do stuff. But just jump into it. Um, don't don't hold back. You're there from the moment your co-op gets there to the moment they leave. You go to extra things. You do, if you've got like a head band director and an assistant band director, and one of them goes home but the other one's staying for pit orchestra, you stay for pit orchestra, because all of that is valuable and they will see you as part of your team. I think
Mm-hmm.
especially with the placements I got, I feel like they, both my middle school and my high school placement, for that semester, they really saw me as an asset. And I think that carried over into the recommendation letters that I ended up getting.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I had the opportunity while I was student teaching to teach the other band directors jazz band, just because they knew I had a lot of jazz experience from playing in college. And he let me run those rehearsals. They were only once a week. But he let me run those rehearsals for the time that I was there. And he was super grateful of the experience that I brought. And I was super grateful that he was allowing me to work with that group, because he obviously wasn't my cooperating teacher. So yeah, soak up as many experiences as you can, but also be incredibly grateful for the opportunities that you do have. Don't go like stomping around, like sniffing around them, looking for them to give you something to do, but be grateful for what you have. And then when the opportunity presents itself, you grab it and say, yeah, I'll do that. I'll try that out. No problem.
Yeah, and if your situation, or and if your uh, co-ops or anything like mine, going above and beyond was something that they did not expect. A lot of
Hmm.
these co-ops they're understanding. I mean they did the same thing, and so when you really go and you do that, sometimes it's like, no, just go home. It's okay. Like, you need the chance to do that ed TPA stuff. We understand. We got it. Um, and then it's like, yeah, you kind of get that working relationship going.
Uh-huh. So let's bridge the gap here for a lot of the people that a lot of the students that are just ready to know what it's like to be a first year teacher. And I think what will be really useful is, let's compare the experience that you had your first day student teaching, which is an experience that some people are either currently having or about to have, with your first day at your new job.
Very, very different. My first day of student teaching was at a middle school, and it was partially, getting to know the environment, getting to know the just where the bathrooms are, whatnot, um, and getting the trust of your co-op. I mean, for me, so I student taught with Cindy Severino, and uh, she was not a co-op who was like, yeah, let's wait 2 weeks to give you the baton. No, she gave me a lot of responsibilities right off the bat, and so jumping in, you're thrust into an unknown, unfamiliar situation, and it's a little bit of sink and swim, but the students are there and they're just excited to have you there. First day as a teacher, you're nervous, but you feel very prepared for it, because I went into it having institute days, having a full week of classes before I do fifth grade. So we were going to do like a bonus week of recruitment, and whatnot. And so by the time I had students coming to me, I was familiar with the building, which is huge because when a kid asks you, where is the bathroom? You don't have to go, I don't know. It's right down the hallway. And then you're able to establish your classroom rules. When you're student teaching, it's your co-op's classroom rules and their set of expectations. And you as a student teacher have to abide by what they say. When you are in charge of your own class on that very first day, it does dawn on you at some point, well, I have to know what I want out of the kids, what I expect, what I'm gracious about, and then how to let them know about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest transition between my first day as a student teacher and my first day as a full teacher. Now, our experiences as full teachers are a little different, because Nick, you're middle school and elementary school, right? Or just middle
I'm
school?
just fifth grade.
Just fifth grade. My present teaching and first teaching situation is fourth through high school band and 2 classes of general music in a small rural district in Southern Illinois. So I am in charge of the entire instrumental music program for this district.
Mm.
So I think the biggest thing was, when you're done with student teaching, like your first day of student teaching, you have some knowledge and you understand kind of like music in general, and that's where you get to test it out. But when you get to your first job, you have to make that switch to understand that everything is on you, right? The things that you are in charge of, your classes, your students, all of that, all of it is your responsibility. And it's not meant to be a scary thing. What it means is you make it whatever you want to make it. So if there are certain parts of the program that you don't want to be as important or you don't want to be as big, that's your prerogative. You can do that, but know that the things that, right from the first day, all the decisions that you make from the very first decision are the things that define what your classroom is going to be for those students. The things you do, the things you don't do, the things you say, and the things you don't say. All of that is creating your classroom for those students.
Right. It sounds much more intimidating than it really is. Words after I had my first couple observations last year, one of the things that my admin told me is that, hey, what we're looking for in a first year teacher is that content knowledge, the ability to just straight up teach that content knowledge and the relationships you have with your students. She told me a lot of the other stuff comes with time, like specifically behavior management, working with paraprofessionals, using student leadership skills. A lot of those things you don't talk about in college, like how to interact with paraprofessionals, with special education students. I cannot think of a single time that was brought up, but it's on your evaluation. But they're not looking for that when you start off. They are looking for you to build a good relationship with your students, and just the content. So if you leave student teaching and you feel like, yes, I understand, how to finger A flat on the flute and how to form the embouchure for a trombone, and how to articulate in this way, you're fine. Like the other stuff comes with time.
Let's talk about that relationship building thing, because that's one of the things that I have down in my kind of notes for this. I wrote down in all caps relationships and leadership, just as like a huge point. So obviously, Nick, you've had a full year teaching already. This is your second year teaching. But right from the get-go, I noticed that the only way that your students really learn anything is if they believe what you're telling them, right? And that
Yeah.
comes from you knowing that student, building the relationship with that student so that they trust that what you're saying like means anything,
Right.
because I think we've all had experiences with teachers that either we didn't trust them or we didn't really think that they were qualified to be doing what they were doing, and we just discredited a lot of what they said right from the get-go. And then maybe later on we look back and we're like, oh, okay, that makes sense what they said. But so right from the very beginning, like your number one priority, at least in my opinion, your I'll say this: your priorities in your classroom with your students and your priorities for your administrators actually do differ. Because if I'm going to be in my classroom and I'm going to just push content first, I'm not going to I'm not going to be anywhere near reaching the number and like quality of education for my students that I could. So my number one priority is getting to know what the students know, who the students are, and trying to basically convince them that the reason they're here, the why they are here is worth their time.
Right. And I can't speak to, yes, I've done like high school and middle school, but my boots on the ground experience has been in fifth grade so far.
Mhm.
And so those kids in fifth grade, uh, if you don't have any younger siblings, you probably don't even know how old they are. They are 11 and 10
They're
at the
goofy.
right. And so a lot of those relationships is making the students feel valued and like
Mhm.
they have a reason to come to your class. If you give them a reason to keep coming back, they'll want to return and they'll want to see you tell them you did a really nice job on
Right.
that. So make them feel, give them a reason to enjoy what they're doing when they're playing their instrument.
I've found that with the young students, right, the fourth graders, the fifth graders, even into sixth and seventh grade and eighth grade, the kids aren't really concerned with the stuff itself. You're teaching them things, but the thing that they really love is when you talk to them, right?
Oh yeah.
You let them tell you stories about their day, and you listen to their ideas, and you can kind of make fun of little kids and their ideas, and poke holes in them, and it's fun, and they get it too. But you have to let them into your world, and
Mhm.
then as soon as they see that you're willing to listen to them and take them, almost treat them like an adult in a way, where you're actually listening to what they have to say and not just saying, all right, kid, that was a good one, but
Right.
taking the time and actually listening to them, because we all know that kids are not going to have the solution to world peace, right? That's not something that we just expect. So we know that a fifth grader is not going to pick up a trombone and be able to play 5 octaves like that. That almost never happens, right? Um, so developing that relationship first and showing the kids that you're there for them. I want to
Mhm.
hear what you have to say about this, and here are some things that you can do that are going to help you along the way.
Right. Something that I'm finding, even in just the last couple months, is that kind of the discipline component of it. Um, because I think just starting off your first year, you're making snap judgments about, yes, this is okay in my classroom, this is not okay, and how
Yeah.
you and how you kind of react to those things. Like you're gonna overreact to a kid not putting away their case correctly. You're gonna, like, why would you not do this? Like that bow has got to be loosened every time. And like, did you really need to do that? But then on the other hand, you might underreact to a situation where you really could kind of put your foot down. Like, even the same situation. No, I've talked to you about loosening your bow every time. That's something that I expect, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Or even more of a disciplinary thing, like You
Mhm.
cannot talk to another student that way, and here's why. In the last couple weeks, I've been not experimenting, but kind of doing a lot more reflection on what that piece looks like. And I've found that parents and kids want the kids to be disciplined, not in a harsh way, but they're looking for that like sense of direction. I've
Mhm.
found that when I let kids almost run the show, or like, you get those lessons where it's like the kid kind of they're doing what they want, and then you're guiding them toward the goal. You have another lesson where you teach almost the same idea, but with a little more heavy handed. No, we're going to do this now. The kids
Mhm.
actually really respond to that, and they see that, okay, no, you do care. You're just redirecting their thought process, and both the students and the parents really appreciate that.
Yeah, so I'll say two things. The first thing is developing this idea that or knowing in yourself that you actually do have the authority in the classroom is
Right.
something that I'm still working on. Right from the beginning, it's like you kind of almost feel uncomfortable speaking as the authoritarian figure in a
Right.
classroom. But as the teacher, you like obviously we're not a dictator, right? You shouldn't be just demanding things of your students, but there has to be a part of it that says, all right, look, we have a goal, we have a plan, and we're going to do this. This is the direction we're going. That's your job as the teacher. um but the other thing is actually a story. So my middle school, the way our structure works is I see them during their lunch, which is not ideal. So I have to facilitate both lunch and band for them at the same time and fit it into, well, a reduced time now for COVID. So I struggled with this for the first, I think it was like month or two, with just trying to balance how to do that. And I didn't, I struggled with this authority thing, telling kids exactly what to do and the tone of voice that you use to tell them. So what I eventually came up with, because it was basically just chaos, right? I said, all right, kids, here's what you're going to do. You're going to get your stuff out and you're going to go to the gym, and then we're going to get started with rehearsal. So this is small, but it was huge for me as a teacher to just kind of get my head straight when I go and do this. Cause it's when you see a room of kids that are just kind of all doing whatever they want, it's overwhelming. You don't feel like you have any sort of influence or anything. So what I did something really simple. It's something that all the kids do anyway. But I implemented something called band ready. And I asked the kids, are you band ready? And all it is they have to say that they are band ready. And they have to show me that they have their instrument, that they have their music and their pencil. Because I told them those are the three things that as long as you have those in band, you will be fine no matter what you do, no matter what you do musically. And this is something I learned in college, playing in the Elmhurst College Jazz Band, that even if I like wasn't wearing pants, as long as I had my instrument, my music, and my pencil, I was going to be just fine.
Right.
So, but the crazy thing about this was now all of a sudden, instead of chaos when the kids came into the room for the first time, they had a thing that they had to do that was simple, but it had a direct consequence. Because I said, if you're not band ready, you're going to stay in the band room until all the other kids that are band ready have gone over and are starting to warm up, and we're going to talk about why you aren't band ready, and we're going to
Mhm.
develop a strategy to figure out how you can be band ready next time. And it's really simple. It's like, okay, I'm going to put my instrument by my door the night before so I don't forget it. Or
Right.
I'm next time I'm going to put a pencil in my instrument case so that those two are combined. I'm not going to forget that again. But it's
Mhm.
taking the time to set a really simple rule with a really clear consequence, and it was almost like magic. Like the kids just got it right. Oh, okay, we're supposed to do this and then we can go do that, versus just chaos, right?
Yeah. That kind of leads to one of the things that lessons learned as soon as possible for me was you have to tell the kids exactly what to do. Like, here's how the structure of class works. When you arrive in the room, you're going to walk through the right door. You will go over, you will get your case, you will take it out, get your pencil, get your instrument, get your book, you'll sit down. At the end of class, you will put it away, you exit through the left hand door, and all of those certain things. And having like telling them exactly what to do is very necessary to avoid that chaos that you were
Yeah.
describing.
And I think a lot of us, especially in this younger generation of music educators, feel that we want we want to have that students should have the choice, right? Which is great, which is you do want to do. But like, just think about the way that you felt in college about all the choice that you had and all the decisions that you had to make. And now think about if you started to give those freedoms to a 10-year-old, right? Like, you're going to be responsible for making sure all of your homework and all of your things are all together and all of your band stuff's ready. And did you practice? And did you this and that and the other thing? The discipline and the structure is actually helpful for them. They,
Right.
because then they don't have to think about it. It's like, oh, okay, this is what Mr. Lowe wants me to do. And now we just go do it. And now I have time to think about, okay, did I tie my shoes today? Like the things that a 10-year-old is concerned with.
Right. Yeah. And the choices that you do give them are the small ones, but that they don't even realize are small choices. Like, do you want to use the green or the pink pencil today? Means a lot to a fifth grader.
And I tell you, those small choices, when you can convince students that those small choices are important to like their overall success, when they get older, you can make those choices become bigger and play a bigger role in their actual learning environment.
Mhm.
So by the time they're high school, you can have high schoolers picking out programs for that they play, or you can have them making decisions as to what we should do in class in terms of musical decisions. And like, those are big choices, but they're all built on the student's confidence in feeling that their choice and their opinion will be honored, right? Just like
Mhm.
making those small choices as a young student.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we'll talk about maybe one more thing, um, and then we'll wrap this up for a little bit. But positive takeaways from college, the things that you definitely felt like gave you a leg up once you got to that first job, that first time you started teaching.
Yeah. I think there's three things that really I felt strongly about for this point. One, if you put in the work, you'll be ready to start. Uh, Number two, uh, college is going to push you beyond your perceived limits. There's going to be several points where you're thinking to yourself, I can't do this. And if you work through it, you can, and you'll come out stronger for it. Um, and the third thing is it teaches you how to be productive around people you like and want to goof off with. It'll teach you how to be productive with those people and how to find common ground with the people you feel like you can't stand but have to work with anyway.
Yeah. So it for me, it's all one. Number one, the background and knowledge base that I have from college has saved my life so many times, because there are a lot of situations when you first start teaching where you get thrown a curveball, right, from a student or a situation or whatever. And if you have your musical knowledge and understanding locked down, you can deal with those things way easier than if you have to go look it up, or if you have to go, do this and the other thing, which is fine. If you don't know something, you should look it up. But for example, have to teach, all levels of music, all different instruments, I am competent basically to about a sixth or seventh grade level on pretty much all of the band instruments, with maybe the exception of oboe. So teaching beginner lessons is no big deal to me. So if I need to make an adjustment to what I'm teaching, or if I hear something and the kid's not quite getting something, I understand what they're going through and I can diagnose that really quickly just because I have that really secure base of knowledge. And when I say having that base, doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be proficient. You should aim to be proficient on all those instruments, but having a base level understanding of them, figure out how to make a sound on a trumpet, figure out how does a woodwind instrument work? What should I expect when it doesn't work, right? Why won't it work? Because beginner woodwind players, most of the time the instrument's not going to work. Just that's just the way that it is. Um, so that's the first thing. Just go into your musical understanding with figuring out how things work and getting that background knowledge, so that base of knowledge that you have. And then really the other thing that I think helped me out the most so far is just the amount of and variety of experiences and relationships that I made in college, both with professors and in the types of musical experiences I was able to have, because I'm able to draw from all of those in my lessons. And, like with the Elmhurst College Jazz Band, we traveled to Europe twice when I was in the band. And I'm able to tell kids that, and that's cool and everything. But the value of that is not just that I could be like a cool guy who traveled. The value of it is I had a musical experience in a different country, and here are the things that we did to be successful in like kind of a stressful environment, right? Like we're on tour and we're on a bus and we're playing, and like how do you do that? How do you still play after not sleep or having jet lag or whatever, taking your experiences from college, which are going to be way beyond anything that your students have ever experienced musically, and making them relevant to what they're learning and showing them that they can get to that experience through the steps that you're teaching them. So that was kind of a big deal for me. I wanted to bring my experience into the classroom as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it's the same feeling that you have, but looking for those of you who are in college, looking post college, I there was a point last year, my first year as a teacher, in the fall, where it dawned on me that I didn't feel the same amount of stress anymore. And it was like, you realize it's kind of like, you know what? I get up in the morning and I'm not tired still. Like I'm rested. So for those of you who are feeling like college is the most stressful thing of all time, it, yeah, there's a lot of anxieties, a lot of stresses with it, but just know that when you get out to the other side, you'll know what you're doing, and you will not have that same level of feeling anymore. Like it dissipates.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think to wrap up here, let's kind of brainstorm some common threads that we've felt through our musical career so far. And hopefully these will lead to some more ideas as to what we can talk about in future episodes. My kind of thread, at least for myself personally, has always been like jumping into something that I'm not quite sure I know how to do yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just being honest with the things that what you don't know, and working through it as much as you possibly can. I, I, when I look back at all the things I've done in high school and college and now in my professional career, I don't think I can name like I don't think I can name a handful of things that I've done that I felt I was 100% prepared for. The only one that comes close is actually, I think, maybe my first teaching job.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I feel like I know how to like teach music. Like I feel pretty confident. Like there's things I don't know, but I feel like I know that I can figure it out. But the only reason that I got to that point is because I jumped into things that I didn't know so many times that I learned how to be comfortable with not knowing exactly how things were going to go. So, as you work your way through your college career and beyond, it's like take some time to evaluate, what don't I know? Let's go find out.
Oh yeah. I'm so excited to talk about that concept because I am a trumpet player. I applied for a band job and was offered a band and orchestra job, and that's the one that I took. So getting outside of your teaching comfort zone is something that I have definitely learned how to kind of go through. Um, I think another thing for me is balancing that work and home life.
Yeah.
Like because we've been talking this whole podcast about the balancing the music side and the education side, and I think once those are blended into, yep, I'm a music teacher, you know the focus becomes the blending of the career and the home life and how you structure that.
That's actually a great idea for another podcast. Is the like as a teacher, we are both like personal people, but we're also professional people. So
Mhm.
the relationships that you develop with your colleagues and your students, but also we're constantly thinking about like what's our career look like. You know, there are career moves that we can make that are going to be good for us that like might hurt some people, right? Might, you know, our students don't want to see us leave or you know what have you. So that's a great idea for
Yeah.
another
Uh,
podcast.
yeah, going off of that, you know, students not wanting to see you leave, um, it'd be a great idea to talk about starting off a new program with you as a new director. You went into an experience where you were taking over for somebody else. I walked into experience where I started my program from scratch. So there was nothing when
Oh,
I
I
got.
didn't know that.
Oh yeah, there was nothing when I got there. I walked into an empty gym full of music stands and chairs and xylophones. Uh, and so we very different situations, but how you pick up what you're given and then make something out of
Mhm.
it.
All right. Until next time.
That about wraps it up.